Your baby is fed, dry, held, not too hot, not too cold, rocked, bounced, shushed, and crying. Just crying. No visible reason, no clear cause. You have run the checklist twice and come up empty, and now you are standing in your kitchen at 2 a.m. doing the sway bounce thing while internally questioning every decision you have made in the last 6 months. That reaction makes complete sense. But developmental neuroscientists have spent the last 2 decades studying exactly what is happening inside an infant's brain during these episodes. And what they found doesn't just explain the crying, it reframes what you thought you understood about how a human mind learns to exist in the world. The obvious explanation is physical discomfort, gas, hunger, overstimulation. Something hurts, something is missing, something is too much, and the baby is telling you. That makes sense on the surface. Babies are pre-verbal. Crying is their only communication tool. So you run the checklist. Fed, changed, burped, held, temperature checked. And sometimes that works. Except sometimes it doesn't. The baby is fed and still crying, held and still escalating, every physical variable addressed, and the crying continues, sometimes for hours, with no discernible trigger and no discernible end. If this were purely a communication system for physical needs, it should stop when those needs are met. It doesn't. And that gap between the checklist solution and the actual behavior is exactly where the real science begins. But here's the problem with that theory. In 2011, researchers at the University of Minnesota's Institute of Child Development, led by Dr. Megan Gunner, published findings in the journal Child Development that reframed how scientists understood infant distress. Using cortisol sampling, measuring the stress hormone directly from infant saliva collected before, during, and after crying episodes, they tracked what was happening inside the body during unexplained crying. What they expected to find was a straightforward stress response that resolved when the crying stopped. What they found stopped the research team cold. Cortisol levels during unexplained crying episodes were not responding to any identifiable external trigger. They were responding to an internal state, a state of neurological dysregulation, which is the technical term for what happens when a developing nervous system becomes overwhelmed by its own sensory and emotional input. Plain language, the baby's brain is not sending a message about something wrong in the environment. It is signaling that the brain itself is overloaded, and the emotional implication of that distinction is enormous. Your baby is not crying because something is wrong with their world. They are crying because something inside them has exceeded the capacity they currently have to manage it. They are not reporting a problem. They are living inside one. But here's where it gets even stranger. Because that is only part of what is happening. Researchers at UC Berkeley's Institute of Human Development introduced a concept that explains what the cry is actually designed to do, a process called co-regulation. The term describes something behavioral scientists had observed for years without a unified framework. When an infant cries without an obvious cause, they are not just expressing distress, they are actively recruiting another nervous system to stabilize their own. The infant brain, in its earliest months, does not have the neural architecture to regulate itself. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for emotional regulation, impulse control, the capacity to calm down, is not functional at birth. It will not reach basic operational capacity until around 18 months. Until then, your baby's nervous system borrows yours. When you respond to the unexplained cry, picking up, holding, making eye contact, speaking slowly, your regulated heartbeat, your calm breathing, your steady voice become the external scaffold their undeveloped brain is standing on. They are not just being comforted, they are using your biology to do what their biology cannot do yet alone. And what researchers found when they studied what happens when that scaffold is suddenly removed, that is the part of this story I need you to stay for. I want to tell you about an experiment that changed how developmental psychologists understand infant emotional development, and that sparked decades of ethical debate about what it means to withhold a response from a crying baby. It is called the still face paradigm. Conducted by Dr. Ed Tronick at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, it is one of the most replicated studies in infant psychology. The setup is simple. A mother sits across from her infant, 3 to 6 months old, and they interact normally. She smiles, the baby smiles back. She talks, the baby engages. Then the mother goes completely still, neutral expression, no response, no returned eye contact, just nothing. The baby tries everything, smiles to re-engage, points, vocalizes, looks away and back, a reset attempt, tries again, nothing. Within 90 seconds, infants who were calm and engaged begin to cry. Not from hunger, not from pain, because the co-regulation source has gone silent. Without it, their nervous system has nothing to borrow from. Dr. Tronick's conclusion was precise. The infant brain does not experience emotional distress as a private internal event. It experiences it as a relational emergency. The unexplained cry is not random noise. It is a biological SOS designed specifically to pull you back in. And what happens inside your baby's brain every single time you answer that SOS is something researchers have only recently begun to fully measure. There is one layer to this that almost no one discusses outside of pediatric neuroscience journals, and it involves what your response or absence of response is actually constructing inside your baby's brain. Researchers at Harvard's Center on the Developing Child have documented what they call the serve and return mechanism, the cycle of an infant's signal followed by a caregiver response. What they found is that this cycle is not just emotionally meaningful, it is structurally formative. Every time you respond to an unexplained cry, you are not just soothing a baby, you are strengthening the neural connections between the amygdala, the brain's stress alarm, and the regulatory circuits of the prefrontal cortex. You are, in measurable neurological terms, building your child's emotional immune system. Infants who experience consistent co-regulation in the first 12 months show significantly greater stress resilience, attention capacity, and emotional regulation by age 3. Not because they were comforted, because they were wired. Their brain learned at the cellular level that distress is survivable and that a response is always coming. So now I need to tell you about the warning. If your baby cries persistently and cannot be consoled, not occasionally, but consistently across multiple attempts at feeding, holding, and position changes, that's worth paying attention to. Not because something is necessarily wrong, but because persistent, inconsolable crying is one of several early markers pediatric neurologists track in the first few weeks of life. 2 signals are worth knowing. The first is a high-pitched, monotone cry that does not follow the typical rhythmic pattern of distress: rise, peak, fall, settle. The second is a baby who cannot be brought to any state of calm by any form of co-regulation, including holding, eye contact, and skin-to-skin contact. These are not causes for alarm. They are causes for a conversation with your pediatrician at the next well visit, or sooner if your instinct says sooner. The brain's plasticity window in the first 24 months, never that wide again. What can be identified and supported at 6 weeks becomes significantly harder to shift at 6 months. You have more data on your baby's baseline behavior than any clinician ever will. Trust the signal when something feels different. That instinct is not sentiment. That instinct is data. So the next time your baby cries with no cause you can find, fed, held, checked, still going, you know what's actually happening. Their nervous system is overwhelmed. They're reaching for yours. Not with words, with biology. 200,000 years of human evolution did not make the infant cry irresistible by accident. It made it that way so you would always come. And every time you do, you are not just surviving a hard night. You are building the architecture of how your child handles hard moments for the rest of their life. If this changed how that 2 a.m. cry feels, subscribe. There's more of this on the channel. Drop a comment below. What was the unexplained cry that finally broke you? The one where you had done everything right and it kept going? Because now you know exactly what your baby was asking for in that moment. Next video, researchers have documented something unsettling about the way babies stare at strangers, locking eyes without blinking, tracking without looking away, not moving on. It's not simple curiosity, and the study behind it changed what scientists thought they knew about infant social intelligence before.